I work with Stacy Purslow at New Hampshire Farm to School, who, along with the New Hampshire Youth and Garden Network, we are putting on this webinar series, which has been running since, oh my goodness, I think it's been the beginning of the year, even though it's already April. But I am really excited about this webinar today. We have Ruth Smith and we have Ted, I'm going to butcher it, Kendziora, who are going to host our webinar about school gardens and troubleshooting some of the issues that folks may be having. So I am going to let them take it over. As you go through the webinar, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat, as well as introducing yourselves, letting us know where you're calling in from and what organizations you're affiliated with. So Ruth, please.
Colleen, do you want to launch the poll too?
Yes, I will do that right now. All right, so Ruth has a poll for everyone. I'm going to launch it. Feel free to submit your answer. So you should see that pop up right on your screen, and we'll let people weigh in.
Great. Well, thanks, Colleen. While folks are filling out the poll, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am Ruth Smith, and I am the program manager for the Master Gardener Volunteer Program with UNH Extension. And so with that, I train and facilitate training for volunteers who want to be better gardeners and help gardens out in communities, including school and youth gardens. So we have about 500 different Master Gardener volunteers in New Hampshire, and many of them work in school gardens around the state, helping educators to maintain the gardens and help teach about gardening. So it's a lot of fun, and I love what I do. I love working with the volunteers and have done a lot of work with school gardens prior to coming to Extension as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's involved in planning a school garden, because sometimes people have great ideas about launching a school garden, but it's a fairly major undertaking. And I want to make sure that folks know what they're getting into. I definitely don't want to discourage people from doing school and youth gardens, because I think they're fabulous and incredible learning opportunities. But I also think it's important to understand what folks are getting themselves into. So I have a little brief PowerPoint slideshow that I'm going to go through with some questions that I think are important to consider. And then I'll take some questions from you all before turning it over to Ted, who's going to talk about some specific projects and activities that we have available. So it looks like we've got a few elementary school teachers, a few high school teachers, youth coordinators, parent and community volunteers, and others. So great little variety here. Thanks for letting us know who you are. Yeah, so great. All right, I am now going to share my screen here. You can all see that. That's just a little bit of who we are, and you'll learn more about that as we go along, and Ted will introduce himself as well. So why garden? I think that's the most important question to get a good answer to. You know, there's so many answers, and there's no right or wrong answers. They're going to be different for each one of you, but it is important to think about why you want to do this. And some of you maybe are already doing some gardening, and if you are, that's great. It's maybe good to go back and revisit, why the heck are we doing this crazy adventure? But set your goals. Like any big projects, you want to have sort of your target and have that be very clear. And when it comes to school and youth gardens, there's a couple different ways that they can go. They can be strictly educational opportunities, and that's wonderful. But they also might be, a goal to raise food for healthy snacks or to use in a cafeteria. And if food production is your goal, then that's a different kind of garden that you want to be looking at than a strictly educational goal. Maybe you don't want to grow food at all. Maybe you're looking at some wildlife habitat enhancement in your schoolyard and looking to do some pollinator gardening, and that's awesome as well. Has some advantages maybe with more perennial plants that don't have to be tended quite so regularly during the summer. So all sorts of things to think about, and maybe you're really looking to have some broader community benefits out of your garden and not have it just be for the kids involved. But really, really important to nail that down right from the get-go. And that might seem obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't do that. And then this is your touchstone to go back to again and again to say, okay, is this meeting our goals? Is this activity that we're doing helping us aim at that target? So really important to be clear on that. The next piece is really about who is part of the team. So again, this might seem obvious to some people, but it's often not thought about in a broad sense. So hopefully the students that you're working with, the learners, the youth, whoever they are paramount on your list, as well as you as the educators or the volunteers who are involved in this. But who else? Who else should be on that list? Who should be at the table in terms of planning? Who should be at the table in terms of involvement throughout the process from beginning to end? School administration, absolutely critical. If you don't have support from your, decision makers at the top, probably not going to get very far. The ground staff is the other crew that really needs to be involved. I've unfortunately heard too many stories of gardens that were well planned out and halfway through the season, and then, oh my gosh, they didn't realize that there was going to be a new baseball diamond put in the place that the garden had been planned, and everything gets torn up. So thinking about who's part of that, who will know those visions and know that answer and understand where the water source is and what kind of mowing might be involved around the garden. So ground staff, really, really important. Hopefully you have parent support too. And again, whether that's at a school or a youth center, it's going to vary how much involvement parents might have. But if they can be supportive of it from the beginning and excited, and the kids are bringing things home to their parents and engaging them, it becomes a family learning experience and not just happening during those limited school or program hours. Again, if you're looking at food production, make sure you're involving the food service staff. What do they want? What can they use? You don't want to be overwhelming them with things that really aren't appropriate for a school cafeteria. Who are the gardeners going to be? Are you, as a teacher, as an educator, a great gardener? If so, that's awesome. If you're not, I would say, reach out to me. Master Gardener volunteers are trained to be great gardeners and to be great project managers and helpers on things like this. But there may also be folks within your community who are fabulous gardeners. You might have a garden club nearby with people who are interested as well. So reach out to your community, reach out to UNH Extension, make sure that you have people that know how to garden, because it's more than just putting seeds in the ground. And any outside partners, this is particularly helpful if you're thinking about funding and PR for the program, making sure you have good partners in that on your team there. So also meeting the needs of various types of abilities, whether you have mobility challenged folks in your program or site issues. There's so many different ways that adaptability can happen in gardens. And so it's good to be thinking about that in advance, so you don't have to be reactive, you can be proactive about it. And timeline, what are you talking? So many times we get calls from teachers in maybe late March, early April that say, oh, I want to do a garden this spring with my kids. Well, folks, it's too late. You should have called me in the fall. We need planning time for these things. And so really thinking about what's involved and giving yourself adequate time to be doing the necessary planning before you put the shovels and the seeds in the ground. And also as part of that process, just set some benchmarks. Along to measure how are you doing, are you meeting your goals, your long-term goals, your short-term goals. And you might be saying at this point, oh my God, I thought she was going to be talking about gardening, not planning. But yep, it's all part of the process. And to have a successful garden, you really need to be a good planner as well. And I know plenty of gardeners who just, go and plant stuff and it grows, and that's fine. But when you're doing it for educational purposes, it's, you want to be as successful as possible. And so having a good plan is really helpful. And again, thinking about your team, who needs to be involved at what stage. And I would say the kids should be involved as many stages as possible because that's part of the learning experience. When it comes to school gardens, so many times summer is an issue for folks. And you know, that's something we can address in a deeper conversation, but just thinking about, do you want to plant things that only are going to grow during the school year and that's doable? Or, you know, do you have some volunteers who can help carry the garden through the summer? So definitely something to be thinking about. Where will the garden be? And that's not just about, you know, where is the flat ground that can take a garden, but, you know, how does the sun impact it? There's the shade coming from. What water access do you have? Are there security issues? Will you need a fence? All sorts of things like that that should be thought about. And you know, raised beds are a pretty common thing to do. It's a great way to do it, particularly if you're not sure what the soil is like. So that's something to be considering as well. And then, you know, the almighty dollar, right? You have to think about money, and these things don't just happen. Although sometimes you can get all kinds of great volunteer support and donated items, but you should have a budget and a sense of, you know, is the school or the program facility going to pay for this, or are you going to have to do some fundraising and ask for support from the community? What kind of supplies and equipment maybe already exists or could be donated or that you might have to purchase. So all sorts of things. There are a lot of grants available for school and youth gardens. We actually have a grant program through the Master Gardener program. You do have to have a Master Gardener connected with your project in order to apply for one of those grants. But we give out anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 a year in grant money to help support educational gardens around the state. So we're happy to help with that if we can. And, you know, some teachers say, I can't have a school garden. I have all these things I have to teach. I can't teach one more thing. And my response to that is, it's not one more thing to teach. It's a tool for how to teach. And my mantra is, there's nothing you can't teach in a garden. And I think that that's really fun to think about and be creative. So if you're a math teacher, you know, I've done measuring with kids to figure out how big the garden should be and how long the rows should be and the spacing of the plants. There's so much great math that can be done, you know, even calculating, you know, the weight of different produce and what that would cost if you had to buy it in the grocery store and per pound feed, you know, costs and things like that. So there's just, the sky's the limit in terms of math and gardens. Lots of social study opportunities. We often promote the Three Sisters Garden, the Native American style garden with the squash, beans, and corn. And that's a really fun thing to do. But lots of different cultures have different ways of gardening. And if you happen to have an immigrant population in or near your community, tap into them because, oh my gosh, we have such great gardeners that have come from Bhutan and Nepal and African countries who are gardening here in New Hampshire, and they have to learn how to do it in our climate, but they know how to garden and they can teach us a lot, which is really fun. Biology, of course, lots of life sciences and interactions and predator-prey relations, insects and the good ones and the bad ones and how they interact and all sorts of things like that. Physical science, of course, as well, with soil. And I would say absolutely always get a soil test in your garden to make sure you know what it has for nutrients, what it needs for nutrients. And UNH has on our website a form that tell you how to do a soil test. So anyways, language arts, you know, even just reading a seed packet. I mean, the back of the seed packets have all kinds of information you can look at, and, you know, hardiness zones and how deep to plant and when to harvest. Lots of things you can learn from reading a seed packet. But again, a lot of other opportunities in language arts and technology. I know probably many of you are STEM focused teachers. And so that technology and engineering piece in the garden can be great. Setting up the irrigation system, how to do that. That's a nice sort of middle school or high school kind of project for some folks. Nutrition, you know, the health, if you're growing vegetables, really great to be thinking about healthy food and incorporating that. Again, that's where the family and the parents can be part of the learning community there. And physical education, gosh, when you're in the garden, you're moving. And so there's a lot of good activity that can happen there. So as I said, nothing you can't teach in the garden. So don't think of it as one more thing. Think of it as a tool for doing what you already have to do. And you know, statistics show that outdoor education and hands-on education actually increases test scores considerably. So if that's what you're being pressured to do, this is a great way to do it. So, you know, the smiles on the faces, the excitement among the kids, that for me is the best test of our success with the school garden. And it happens all the time. Doesn't mean there aren't challenges, and we can certainly talk about that, but those are some things that I hope everybody will think about before you get started. So these are a few resources. This is being recorded, and Colleen is actually also going to provide a resource list to folks who have registered, so you don't have to worry about copying these things down, but just let you know that on the School and Youth Garden network website, there are a lot of resources there, so check that out. And Kids Gardening is a great source. There are some wonderful books out there, as well as online resources. And of course, Ted and I are also happy to be resources for you as well. So that is the extent of my slideshow. And I'm happy to take a few questions before I turn it over to Ted. And I know that wasn't a whole lot, again, not a whole lot about gardening in there, but really important things that I think everybody should think about before you actually do the gardening. So happy to take questions at this point. But Sarah has her hand raised.
Hi.
Thanks, Sarah.
Hi. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it. There's a couple of us in this webinar right now from the same elementary school. I was just wondering, because I'm a master gardener in Vermont, and your grant that you offer, is that for any master gardener regardless of state, or is it only New Hampshire?
Only New Hampshire, but I don't know whether the Vermont Master Gardener program has a similar program or not. I'm not sure, and I think they have a new coordinator in Vermont, so you might reach out to her and see what the status is there. But yeah, the funds in New Hampshire, unfortunately, for you at least, have to stay in New Hampshire. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Other questions? Well, I hope this was helpful. It might not be exactly what you were expecting, but I do think it's important to get some of this nailed down. And if folks are looking for, and it's like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? You know, again, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to help you sort of think about how to set up a plan and walk through it. And we can have master gardeners working with you on that as well. So good. Glad it was helpful. Any questions before we move on? Sarah, do you have another question, or is your hand still raised?
No, I do.
Okay.
So you had a list of things to do, like talk to folks of who was going to be involved and whatnot. What about some don'ts? What are some things that if we knew those ahead of time, we would be much more successful as we're creating this garden? Yeah,
great question. Well, I would say, you know, it's almost the flip side of some of the do's is don't leave out your grounds crew at your school. You want them on your side. And I think that's really, really important. Don't try to do too much. I think that's the best advice I can give you as well. You know, start small. And one of the best examples I have of that is a garden that I did in Concord, New Hampshire with one of the elementary schools there. And we had a tiny, I mean, it was, I don't know, it was maybe 10 by 8 or something like that plot. So it wasn't very big. And it was, you know, one class that did this. And they planted a Three Sisters garden. and the kids all had their little sections, and it was very manageable and very, very doable. And the one thing that was really, well, there were many things that were really fun about that particular garden, but one of the best things was they started it in 4th grade and they carried through to 5th grade, and they harvested the same garden that they had planted. And if you can do that full cycle process is really, really valuable. And an example of that is we planted pole beans. So they were climbing up the corn stalks, and they were beans that they weren't like green beans that you had to pick all summer long because it was summer and they weren't there. So they were full, fall harvest. Everything we planted was something they could harvest in the fall when they came back. So the pole beans that they picked, they were, like dried beans like you use for baked beans or burritos or something. One girl opens the seed pod of the beans and she looks at it and says, "Oh my gosh, these are just like the seeds we planted in the spring." Well, I did not need to get paid that day. That was just like eureka, right? So that full cycle thing is really, really valuable if you can do it. But again, keep it small and manageable. What else not to do? I don't know. I think if you think about the things to do, it'll almost help steer you away from other stuff. Like nothing else is popping in mind right now, but it's a good question. Others? Thoughts? Well, we'll have time for more questions at the end as well. So if you think of some, either put them in the chat or hang on to them until then. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ted.
Okay. Share my screen. All right. I'm hoping that's working for everybody. So, and it's good to see faces too. So better than a webinar. So I appreciate this. So as Colleen stated, yeah, my name is Ted Kendziora. She did hit that right. That was fantastic. It's not an easy one, but I'm a biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm actually stationed out of our New England field office in Concord, New Hampshire. And I work for a program within the service called Partners for Fish and Wildlife. So I am coming at this a little differently than most people on this call. I didn't notice, I mean, there were a few others, so it'd be interesting to find out what those others are and who you work for to see who else is out there and listening. But what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to focus on some of the troubleshooting issues that may come up with planning, implementing, not only a garden, but an outdoor classroom or a trail or a pollinator garden. So Ruth and our programs, we both have goals. And my goal is to, I have two goals in mind, and it's one is to teach people about the value of wildlife and the environment, and it's also to get kids outside. So let's see here. Now I gotta hit next slide. All right. So, well, why outside, right? I guess let's talk about this as we'll come full circle on this. Why are we outside? Why are we doing this? Well, COVID unfortunately taught us a valuable lesson, right? Like, wow, if we were more prepared, maybe we wouldn't have had to be out of school for so long with these kids. And as Ruth stated, kids just learn better outside. There are so many studies. I didn't even have time to put links out, but you can reach out to me. We've got studies I can find, but it supports you mentally, emotionally, physiology, the hands-on engagement, the multidisciplinary learning. So Ruth and I, we will talk. We're going to overlap on a few things, so I'll kind of run through these fairly fast. Investigations. There's science-based opportunities, but there's also more than that. Don't think that just because we're getting kids outside, they have to be in the environmental fields. Some people don't want to put their fingers in the dirt, but hey, maybe they're going to be great at managing. Maybe they're going to be great at writing grants. So you don't have to push them into the environmental field, but for my opinion, I think it's good to know about the environment because it's going to help you in a lot of different job choices. So now that we have that, you know, we wanted to know, like, all right, well, what's a schoolyard habitat program? Well, it's really different for every school that I go to, right? Basically, what we want to do is we want to design and connect students to the outdoors. We want to restore wildlife. We want to inspire the next generation of environmentally conscious people. Notice I didn't say like environmentalists or environmental students, but, you know, be aware. But those are kind of my goals. And like Ruth was saying, what are your goals? Is it a vegetable garden? Is it a pollinator garden? How much maintenance do you want to do? Is it just a space to hang out outside for quiet time or learning? So what we did is, as I looked at this, as I became more involved with Schoolyard, Schoolyard education and things, I started looking around at all our different organizations and, hey, whoa, wow, we have a big variety of goals, and everyone has their own obligations to take care of, certain funding, certain goals, certain restrictions that they can work with. So what I started to do is I pulled together some people, some organizations and some groups. So with us, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, New Hampshire Fish and Game, New Hampshire Audubon, and Project Learning Tree, we came up with what is called the Schoolyard Action Grants. And you'll see I'll have a website in here in a little bit. But what we tried to do is get in touch with these organizations because, well, one, when I started reviewing them, when they first gave me money back in 2015 and said, hey, Ted, go out and have some fun, I looked at everybody's applications and they were pretty much all the same. People have just been taking the applications from each other and utilizing them. So I said, hey, why don't we come together, pool our resources, lessen the application project, try to help more people, give out some larger size grants and things to that. So, and we're always looking for more organizations. So if anybody's out there and you want to help with us or donate and see if you can pull your money a little bit further, it's a great opportunity. So what we do in our New Hampshire Schoolyard Action Grants is annually now from about 2015, we give out anywhere from $500 to $2,000, sometimes more, depending on the school, the ask, the story you tell us, the need, what you have for match. So, and what we do with that is we help you in a variety of different ways. Possibilities are almost endless, but working with Audubon and New Hampshire Fish and Game, we're developing lessons that we can integrate into your school curriculum. We have lots of online resources to use. We have videos online. We have live garden webinars. We have interactive garden for New Hampshire Audubon. Our people that we're working with, they'll come out to your school and, you know, give you a showroom, teach you in the class, teach your kids, educate just the teacher so they can go out and teach the children. We'll work with a landscape architect, help you design a plan, give you more or less our opinion of what I've seen, because I'm fortunate enough, I've been able to work not only all over New Hampshire for this, but all over New England putting in schoolyard gardens. So there's a lot of things that I take by just going to other places and asking questions. We'll help you with native plants and food, wildlife covering, shade, trees, things of that nature. We'll help you construct trails depending on the age group. You know, we have to think about, are we close to school, to the school building? How old are they? Can they get there? We help provide funding for buildings and outbuildings and parcels. And so what happens is, you know, every year around January, we start throwing out some emails and saying, hey, please, if you have anything, come on and submit an application. So I think this year we probably got about 20-something applications, and I think we granted 5 to 8 schools So, and that's a link down there that we'll be able to post it in the chat soon. So, and so, like I said, what have we done? Well, since 2015, you can see kind of our projects here. We have well over 50 projects since 2015, anywhere from, like I said, outdoor classrooms, trails, pollinator gardens, monarch way stations, field trips, lessons. That's just kind of what my group kind of focuses on and does over there. As you can see, we're lacking a little bit in the White Mountains and north and that area by Maine. So if anybody has anything, let me know. Those in Vermont, I can also help you as well. And we also have a partners program in Vermont that may be able to help you depending on where you're located. We share responsibilities sometimes. So, all right. So what we wanted to do is, again, we're setting the stage here. Every project is different. And I mean, everyone. So it's really dependent on what you want to do. What I try to help out is this ecologically sound? Are you putting in native plants? Are you manipulating the land in a way that you shouldn't? What are the benefits to wildlife? What are the benefits to people? Some of these projects, Ruth said, there is a small 10 by 8 plot. Well, I've had smaller ones, right? Maybe we're not benefiting wildlife to the best, but man, I bet you we touched a lot of people and educated them to help them a little bit more. Now they know not to step on that last aster in the winter, We help you to integrate it into your curriculum. And this is one of the biggest points I'm going to point on is it needs to be within the school. Someone asked, Sarah, you asked about what you shouldn't do. Don't do it alone. Do not do it alone. Those are one of the things we're going to talk about in troubleshooting is if you leave, if you change schools, if you retire, that project is done with you, and it's unfortunate. And those kids, they move on every year, right? So that integration of step by step through the years is amazing how happy the kids are. If you put it in their 5th grade class and they don't come back for 6th grade, it could be lost. So, and that kind of leads to the long-term stewardship. So based on that, what Fish and Wildlife Service, which is my program, we have a Schoolyard Habitat Project Guide. It is online. It is a super easy read. It's funny, it's 50 plus pages, but it's so easy. And it's broken down and onto what to do, how to plan this and to push it. So, and the big things is you got to initiate, you got to start talking, then you got to create it. You got to incorporate it. You have to maintain it, and please, the bottom one there, share your story. I can't ask for anything more. The more you guys talk and tell other people, the more it gets up to my leadership and more they know that people want this, the more funding that I receive for this. So talk, share your stories, post it, call us, write us notes, send us pictures. So, okay, there we go. So what I wanted to do here is, again, I have some tips, maybe not so the don'ts, but some tips that we have over here. So again, research, ask questions and research, right? This should not be, ooh, I saw your grant application. I want a garden or an outdoor classroom. Can I do it in January and get my money in March and have this all set? It doesn't, it takes plans. And the troubleshooting is not only with you guys out there that are installing the gardens or outdoor classrooms, it's us too. At first, when we started this program, that's what we did. We awarded money in January, February. We said, hey, go out there in springtime and plant the garden, and then we walked away. We've made mistakes, without a doubt, in the past. That is not the way to do it. A lot of those gardens fail. Those people move on. It's not vested with the school. And so we learned from that too. So there's troubleshooting all in there. One of my biggest things is and I put it first, is involve the students. This may be your idea and in that, but without the students, in my opinion, you don't have a project. And then from there, without the teachers to push it in administration, maintenance, and other interested parties, you will not be able to continue this in the long haul. Again, planning for summer, connected to the curriculum, make people use it. On this picture here, you see a site plan for a school that we did in Chesterfield. Man, they have so much activity and use in their outdoor garden spaces. They had to set up a schedule because they would walk out there, other classrooms were in there utilizing it already. Work with your school to make people use it, set it up, put it out there. Try to work with other teachers to extend your learning periods outside. You know, if you're in a school that only has 30 or 40-minute blocks and you have to take roll call before and after, see if you combine 2 classes in a row to get them out there to make it worth the while. Talk to professionals about wildlife and habitat, get an idea of what you have out there. I can come out there as Fish and Wildlife Service, UNH Cooperative Extension, Master Gardeners, New Hampshire Fish and Game Biologists, Natural Resource Conservation Service Soil Scientists. Their options are unlimited. Environmental Protection Agency can come out and teach you about water and water quality. There is so many opportunities out there that people love to do this. Attend these workshops and webinars. We have a list of webinars that are going on with this Farm to School. You can review everything there. My program, Action Schoolyard grants, under our website, you'll be able to find other pre-recorded stuff. I'm also in the middle of providing little, 1 to 5 minute videos about either species or flowers or gardens or habitat. I've got a couple of them already worked out, and we're trying to find a format to put them online. Make a map of your site, talk to everybody, get that inventory going so you know what's out there and what you can use, and then when people are asking questions, you can answer it. 22. So again, who can make this happen? Well, us as professionals, my job, I can help you design it, pick the plants for you. I got other people that can help you with curriculum. I can come and help you work and do stuff during the day, but it's only you and your team that are going to make this thing last. That is the best advice that I can do. It's not me. I will not be there every day. I'm there a lot. You can call me, but I can't be there every day. You guys are there every day. So again, we got about 20 minutes left. I'm going to save some time for questions, but I wanted to run through here and give you some examples of projects and what we did to troubleshoot them over the years. I wanted to start you off with some of the less fortunate, right? Like, these are the saddest pictures I have. Not all my projects worked out, right? Some were complete failures. One, we have a garden on the left here, if that's how you're seeing it. It was disbanded. It was put in. It was vandalized right away. It was in the city. The plants were ripped out. The teacher retired. It was never fixed again, unfortunately. On the right, that garden was put in, and what happened is they thought that they had to fight between what programs they wanted to use, my program or C21 or UNH, and the lack of talking created ideas that were mixed, but then not having the right people implement it. So instead of garden tubs, we had water ponds over here. Very unfortunate. We have to have the right people in, and I won't get upset if you don't call me directly and don't want to use my money or whatever, but we're all here to help you. And that's all I can stress. We're all professionals. Yes, we have our biases of how our programs run, and we'll talk to you about what we think, but take in everybody's idea. That's all I can say. We're not going to steer you wrong. No one's going to mislead you. Use what's best for your site and what your team wants to do. So let's get to some of the happy things, right? So up here, we had a site, the teachers came in with a plan and the students, they wanted to build a giant garden. It was something like 30 by 50. I talked to them and I said, you know, do you really have the time and space to do that and do all this weeding? And so what we did is we narrowed it down, plus the funding to do it, the money for soil amendments, weed fabric. And we said, hey, why not smaller gardens? And so I went out there, I turned the soil with them, I helped them, but these kids created the shapes. You were standing right there in front of that, that's a gingerbread man that they decided to make, you know, keeps them vested in the project. The bottom one is a heart, you know, let them come up with the ideas. Show them some pictures, but let them do it, let them be involved. I have some people there that wanted to push the rakes and do it. I have other people there that just wanted to point fingers and tell people where to put plants, and that is fine. Use your after school programs, youth professionals. You know, here we are, we're building a structure, an outdoor structure, so they can get out there and they can teach. There's all sorts of things you can do. There's all sorts of grants. Reach out to your big box stores, ask them for materials. You'd be surprised at what they give away. It's really amazing. Over here, this is the example of, you know, we can do this anywhere. This is a Manchester school built on concrete, right? We can make it work. We can get your kids out anywhere that you want to get them out, right? It just takes passion, desire from everybody. This one, it's New Hampshire. It rains, it snows, and it's cold. Well, yeah, and I don't like being cold. I got my sweatshirt on, right? We got some schools that they go out no matter what, rain or shine. If they're scheduled, you're out there. But there's so many things that we can do inside. We have anywhere from planning and having the kids do this. Most of my projects, I don't come in and plan it for you. I talk to the kids about what it is. I ask them what type of plants used to grow here. What should be planted here? Let's go review soil. How far spacing should we put these plants? They have to do all the work. I am not there to do it for them. I just direct them in the right places. Teachers will bring in up above, hey, we can't go out. There was no snow for our tracking session. Let's make something. Photos down below. We set up bird viewing stations through the kids' windows, right? They didn't have to go outside. We taught them how to use binoculars. I have binoculars. Sometimes we can share. Sometimes you can buy them. And then that is it, right? So I think I saved us about 15 minutes for questions. So I think I did pretty well. Here's my contact information, but we can send it out in emails. And I'm open for questions, but also for Ruth as well, right? It's for whoever can answer. And again, if anybody's on the call here, if you guys have examples you want to talk about, questions to ask, you can read them off, type them in, you can tell your story. We have time. And I have to stop sharing. Oh, nope, I was stopped. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both to Ted and Ruth. That was wonderful. Again, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat, and I can read them out. Or as Ted said, if you have a great story you want to tell about a garden that you started or you're working on that you really want to share, we're more than happy to hear it. So please feel free to share.
I have a quick story while people are thinking about questions in terms of, Ted talked about the failures. And one garden I did with a preschool, actually, we were doing a veggie garden, and it was preschool that ran through the summer. So we had, things that were growing all summer long. And this little, 3-4-year-old girl, as the peppers were starting to get, not quite ready to pick, but they were getting there. And she was so fascinated by this, pepper that was growing on the plant that they had planted, that she went up and she picked it. And the teacher was like, no, it's not ready, right? And so it could have been one of these disaster moments of, oh darn, our great pepper here is not not going to get to do what it was supposed to do. We made it into a teachable moment. You know, we cut it open, we looked at the seeds, we talked about how much it had grown and how much it might grow later. And, you know, it just, what could have been a really sad moment became a pretty fun exploration. And so I think that's the other thing about gardens is, you know, there are failures, and usually those come about because of that lack of planning, but mostly there are really very few failures if you have the right attitude about making it that learning experience and exploration with kids. And they're so curious about everything. I mean, that was what that was all about. The little girl wanted to pick it. She wanted to see what it looked, you know, it was curiosity. So try to be flexible. I think that's one of the key things with gardens. And, you know, stuff happens. I mean, even those of us who've been gardening for decades, the season changes, the woodchuck comes in and mows down your green beans, you know, that, I mean, stuff happens. So you need to be able to make the most of it or learn from the experience.
I did see one question in the chat here, but it looks like Sarah had to leave in Vermont equivalent. So if you do happen to watch this recording, but we do have a Partners for Fish and Wildlife program out of Vermont. You can Google that and find some contacts, or again, you can reach out to me and I can connect you with the right people as well.
Awesome. Thank you both.
I'm curious how many of you are already working in educational gardens or are thinking about planning them. Anyone who wants to just raise their hand if you're working in a garden already?
Oh, we got a couple.
Got a couple. Okay, good.
Great.
And anybody who's just starting to think about it? New school garden. Okay, great.
Falmouth, Maine. I go up to Falmouth, Maine. I'm all over New England. So anybody have a trouble they want to try to resolve in 2 minutes, 5 minutes?
Troubleshooting, that's what we're here for, right?
So I'm Sam from Stonewall Farm in Keene, New Hampshire. We're working with our first school. We just started last week. And you know, it's funny, you know, I feel like this will kind of come more easily over time, but kind of the thing that I'm like trying to work around in my head right now is how to like best like have like how to best like plant when you have a larger group all around like the same garden bed, you know. And I'm not talking like huge groups, but you know, like 10 kids, you know, and kind of like how to, because you know, obviously they get out there, they're really excited, they have so much energy, and you don't have a lot of time. And so just kind of like, yeah, like best practices of like what's worked well for other people when doing like, specifically I feel like planting is the hardest one because you want things to be spaced out properly. And yeah.
Yeah, I would just say it depends on, you know, what you have for space, but if you can set it up so that, you know, like our Three Sisters garden that we did, we actually set it up in little quadrants so that like 3 or 4 kids had their square that they were responsible for, and then we sort of blocked it out. So that actually worked pretty well. I mean, if you're sort of stuck on doing rows, maybe you divvy it up and have different sections of the rows. The other way to do it is to divvy up the tasks. So that, you know, some kids are putting the seeds in the ground and some are patting down the soil and some people are watering, and you rotate so everybody got to do some of that. Okay. But, you know, that's one way to sort of space it out a little bit. Ted, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I like those ideas too. See, I'm learning too. Like what I look at is you need to plan ahead too. Like what's the most important thing? Do you go to a site and the soil's not even turned over and you want them to turn the soil over and you only have a limited amount of time? Is that the best thing? Is that what you want to teach them? Or do you want to have them actually put the plant in the ground? So you really got to think about what the most important part of your lesson is. And I've fallen into that, right? I've thought we were going to be planting all together and they sent me out students like 5 at a time. So the first ones had to clean, second ones had to dig, the third ones prepped the soil or put the plants in, the fourth one's watered, and that was it, you know? And I was like, they all didn't get this, they all had different experiences, but they didn't get the whole thing. So you really need to plan your time and what the most important thing is.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
There was a hand up, then it went down. So feel free to just shout out.
I was going to type this answer in the chat, but as long as we have a minute, somebody had questions about summer, and I think probably a lot of you might want to know answers about that. So there's a lot of different ways of addressing summer, and as I mentioned, you know, I had a friend who did a lot with school gardens, and he said, don't worry about summer, don't even plant stuff for the summer, you know, and he was a vegetable gardener, so he was focusing on, you know, things that grow quickly, things that are cold hardy. So spinach, I mean, radishes are really easy, but kids usually hate them. So yeah, you know, it's fun for a growing experience, but not so much fun for an eating experience. But thinking about short season crops that can be planted pretty early on and still harvested before the end of school, or with fall plantings as well. And there are a number of things like spinach that can be planted in the fall and harvested. Especially, frankly, climate change is extending our seasons. It's probably the only good thing about climate change. But, you know, we used to count on a frost, killing frost by mid-September, and gosh, you can go into mid-October, depending on what part of the state you're from, without having a killing frost now. So, you know, thinking about that. But I would also say, you know, maybe it's not a vegetable garden. Maybe it's a perennial pollinator garden that, you know, once it gets established and, you know, has some good mulch and maybe a little bit of irrigation, but once it's established, probably wouldn't even need that. So, you know, sort of takes care of itself in the summer and becomes more of a space of learning as you observe the pollinators and maybe do a science project of different kinds of bees and insects that are coming. And the other thing is, as we did with Three Sisters Garden, grow things that don't need a lot of attention in the summer. So the harvest time is not during prime time when you're not there. So, you know, a fall harvest crops like winter squash or pumpkins, or the corn we grew was not sweet corn, it was flint corn, the kind that you grind to make cornmeal. So that's a late harvest crop, as well as the shell beans. So there's a lot of different ways of getting around that. But don't not garden because the summer is your obstacle. That's my takeaway on that one.
Thank you, Emily. You have some great thoughts in the chat for that as well. I appreciate you sharing those. Sam, you want to chime in with another question?
Yeah, and also like a comment on that too. In my own garden at home, I've had some good success with using cardboard, just like you soak it so that it's like wet all the way through, and then putting that over the ground and kind of using, you know, either rocks or soil to hold it down. That was like the best weed suppressant. I like tried out paper bags, newspaper, like those were good too, but cardboard was like, there was nothing. So that's kind of what our plan is for our school gardens throughout the summer. I also just wanted to like see what people have had for experiences with so just raised garden beds in general is new for me. I've done farming before, so like, you know, working on actual farms where we're planting into the ground, and it's like I just feel like it's a different beast, you know. So I'm just kind of wondering what people's experiences have been with planting squashes in raised garden beds, like how that's worked, like if it's, you know, if they'll be okay kind of growing over and down the sides and onto the ground, like just, yeah, I guess just experience in general with that.
So for us, we've done squash, and one thing that we have to be careful with is making sure that when they do grow down and around, that they're not in the way of the lawnmowers for the summer, depending on what goes around the raised bed. So we try to plant them towards it. We have a mulched area, so we try to plant the squash towards the inside. So when it does spread, it doesn't get mowed down by the lawnmower, because that was it was a sad lesson to learn that day.
That's
Again,
like,
the townspeople,
I would not
right?
have thought of that.
Another thing to think about is vertical gardening. You know, a lot of times we think about maybe trellising cucumbers, but you actually can trellis a variety of squashes. I mean, I wouldn't do it with like a blue Hubbard or something that's so heavy, but zucchinis and summer squash, if you have a, you know, like a cattle panel or something like that that's pretty sturdy, you can actually grow things up instead of, you know, having them trail. So something to think about. There's a great book called Square Foot Gardening, which is all about sort of maximizing your space in a, you know, a small space. You don't have to have a small space to use the techniques, but it's a great way to think about using space differently, I guess.
That's how I grow my vegetable garden because I'm in the city.
Awesome. Great question, Sam. Thank you. All right, well, we have a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Just a couple. I had one question. I was just curious if anybody ever heard of my program I work for or the grants that we give out. Nobody. Awesome.
Well,
I should advertise more.
Yeah.
All right.
Our
Nonprofit.
school is looking at it. I think that one of the other elementary schools in our district might have done some work with you.
Okay. What school do you know?
Idlehurst Elementary School in Somersworth.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just over at Maplewood.
It's a great question. How many of you are familiar with the Master Gardener program? Yeah, you folks.
Can like nonprofits apply on behalf of like schools that they want to work with that like need raised gardens put in?
So for my grant, yes. We don't discriminate about anybody who applies. The goal is to get kids outside and educate them. So, like I said, one of the biggest things for me is that vegetable garden piece is probably not the highest priority for our group, right? If you were going to plant gardens or raised beds, we're looking at that, you know, the touch, the feel, the smell. Why are you going to use it? How are you going to study it? And then putting in, if you do have to do raised beds, you know, native plants and keeping that working throughout the summer, right? So, but hence why I joined this farm to school is because we're together. You need those native plants and the pollinators for the vegetables. So don't be afraid of them, use them. And it's funny, I've had teachers tell me, we don't want the bad bugs, just the good bugs, you know? And I was like, what are bad ones? Oh, the ones that sting. I'm like, bees? Like, oh yeah, nah, can we just have butterflies? That's going to be a hard one. And I still haven't troubleshoot that one, but, you know, that's kind of where my program leans towards. And you're always welcome to reach out and ask questions, and we can help you, point you in the right direction of what program's the best for what you're seeking.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Ted. You know, sometimes people think about vegetable gardens or flower gardens, but integrating them really, you know, it helps bring the pollinators to the veggies, and companion planting sometimes is great to help dissuade some of the insect pests. So lots of opportunities there.
Awesome. All right, we're down to the last minute. I wanted to take a moment to thank Ruth and Ted for an amazing presentation. I think we got some good information from them. This session was recorded, and I'll be distributing that out with the resources that Ruth and Ted shared in their presentation, so look out for that. And our webinar series is actually coming to an end with our last one on April 14th. Is all about Indigenous New Hampshire's educational curriculum about farm to school and growing seasons from an Indigenous perspective. So that should be really exciting. You can check that out on the website. So if we are all good, I will let everyone go, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And if there's any questions, we can answer those offline.
And happy gardening. Best of luck, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.